Jessica Deckinger, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Mateo. I'm so happy to be with you today.
Today, we're going to have a fun conversation on what it takes to succeed in technology in 2024, and especially around investment and for startups that are trying to get investors. What does it take to get there, right? And it's been quite a wild ride over the last years, over the last decades, I will say. But 2020 pandemic and everything that got us here, it's been a wild ride. And Jessica, you have an amazing experience in the venture fund industry, in the technology industry, in software, in marketing, over 20 years of experience in the industry. And right now you're a leading partner at a venture fund, a private equity firm, right? So I want to get started by the basics, right? What do you do today for a living? And tell us a little bit about your story.
So hard place to start when you have a lot of time in the resume, but the summary of where I am now is I run my own marketing firm. And so part of what I do is I work for venture firms and a PE fund as an operating executive, an operating partner. I also do my own fractional work because I love being able to take what I've learned over the past 2+ decades and support lots of businesses that are in motion in lots of stages of growth. And so running my own organization allows me to do that. And I do that across tech, varieties of tech. So health tech, fintech, SaaS, kind of all of the things that I've done in my career now have come together in a portfolio of work that I do with my company, Mint Marketing. And so it's been an amazing journey to get here. I had a very, very, very diverse path, and it was non-linear at the best of times, extremely zigzaggy at other times. And it's brought me to a place where I have a really broad kind of remit of things that I can do, and I love that. And so it lets me do those lots of things every day when I have my own portfolio of work, as opposed to kind of focusing on one thing. It's a great time, and I'm enjoying it immensely. It's been about a year and a half since I started my company, and I would not change a thing.
Beautiful, and congrats on that. So you talk to a lot of different customers and you see a lot of companies that are succeeding, some that might not succeed. Um, is it a tough environment today? There's a lot, the writings on the wall, and whatever I hear is that, it's not easy, right? It's today, it's not what it was 5 years ago. Um, what are your thoughts on how the venture market looks today, and what does it take to really succeed today in technology?
I think it's a very tough time. I think it's an incredibly big opportunity at the same moment. The challenge is that we are in a time when technology proliferates, right? We have AI to help us build it. We have machine learning to help us power it. We have incredible knowledge around the world about what works, what doesn't in different kinds of industries and spaces and verticals. And so finding deep pain points that are unaddressed is tougher than it used to be, because the speed and the velocity with which companies launch trying to solve those problems is just faster than it ever was. And so I think when you want to compete, being really sharp and crisp on what the problem is you're trying to solve is more important than it ever was. And that makes it really competitive. I also think from the venture side, it's tough because for a couple of years in there, well, many years in there, pre-pandemic and even during the pandemic, the eyes wider than stomach around the valuations of companies and what they could do was like, it was like unicorns abound. Everyone was talking about how they were going to be the next unicorn. And it became like a unicorn supposed to be this like rare, unique thing. And everyone was talking about how they were a unicorn. And I think investors had a lot of cash and were ready to go in and jump on the coolest, newest thing they thought was going to change the world. And so valuations got kind of out of whack. And I think people raised a lot of cash, and not everybody did, but a lot of folks raised a lot of cash. And then Now in the market, it's harder to compete and deploy that in an effective way. And so over the last few years, companies that took a lot of cash, are struggling to be able to deliver what they said they were going to do because it's just a tough macroeconomic environment. And especially for B2B companies and B2C, there's just less cash flowing. So if you're selling to another company and they're struggling to sell to another company, it's this like circular thing. If you're selling to consumers and they don't have as much cash in pocket, or inflation is affecting their lifestyle, it's a really tough dynamic in that mode too. And so I think, it's a tough time, but the upside is that I think if you have something really great, if you really do solve a pain point and you can move quickly and you crisply know how to define a solution for that pain point that will actually solve the pain, you're probably positioned better than other competitors in your space or others in the ecosystem of tech right now.
So it's money used to flow everywhere. It's not the case anymore, and so B2B or B2C, whatever, it's money just is not as abundant as it used to be. And so that's a problem if you don't have a well-defined problem, if you didn't find a deep enough pain point that you're solving and you have a crisp solution to it, right? So
You said it
how,
much more succinctly than I did.
yes. That it's so how can a startup find and show evidence of product market fit, and what are investors looking for, right? You're talking about, okay, finding a pain point and really solving it. You probably go to a lot of you know uh pitches. You get pitched many times, and so what are you looking for there?
Right now, I think I'm hearing like different sides of the coin. VC and PE look for different things. I think for me, as someone who's an investor and someone who's looking at opportunities, and I think for many VCs, product market fit is about steady growth more than flash in the pan, big wins right now. And even VC world, that's a little bit about that. It's like having that really great, crisp messaging, product positioning, problem solving, and then seeing that steady growth happening. Because I think what people in the investor side are a little wary of, and this is my opinion, not everybody's, is that there's this potential for flash in the pan success that can't be scaled. And it is some of what happened kind of during pandemic. Companies, that did delivery and did all these things that kind of made it easier in the pandemic, had super high growth. Things you did in your home, there's all these things that were situational to the moment, but aren't long-term steady growth trajectory paths, because post-pandemic, when things changed and people were leaving their homes,
Yeah.
those companies couldn't cut it. I think that made investors a bit wary about like what is happening now, creating a momentary lift versus having something that really addresses a longer term pain point being more viable. And so that, I think, is what signals to me product market fit is that you've demonstrated over an extended period of time, and that could be like a year or two, but really that you've demonstrated a steady growth trajectory, that you have a clear plan as to how you're going to continue that growth and scale, and that it's not about lobbing a ton of cost of acquisition to prove a flash in the pan result, but that
Right.
it's a really like that the demand is actually there for what you've built and created. And I think if there's real demand, then there is inbound interest. People are, going to come a little bit more to you, even when you field what you're doing out there. It feels like, oh, aha, they solve a pain point. Even if I didn't know I had it, that I am acutely aware of, I will then inbound and request a solution to this because it's painful enough. And I think if that's not happening as a marketing indicator, if it's not happening as a sales indicator, then, that's a tougher thing for me right now, just because of the market that we're in, where I look at investors who, even if they have a ton of cash, are kind of on the sidelines watching a little bit. So it's interesting. It's that moment right now where you're kind of trying to figure out what's real versus what's flash in the pan.
Is AI part of that flash in the pan today? I mean, and let me explain where I'm coming from. it seems that everyone I talk to feels like if you're getting in front of an investor, if you don't mention the word AI somewhere, you are not getting any money, right? Um, but you were saying a few things that are very important. You said, we live in a moment where technology proliferates, and we live in a moment where everyone is moving so fast that you think you might find a problem that is very unique, but maybe there are a few solutions to it, and you just, it's moving so fast that you didn't realize. And so that's why you're looking for that steady growth. And it seems that AI is kind of, everyone is talking about the new AI on something, right? It's just something that I'm doing. I'm just doing a, sort of a copilot or whatever for that specific situation. But also that seems to be readily available for everyone. It feels like we are moving towards a point where everyone is going to be able to just pay just a few dollars, or I mean, it's going to become omnipresent, right? It's just, everyone will have access to that. How do you feel about that? If someone just is basing the entire pitch on AI, or what do you see in terms of companies trying to just leverage that to get money?
I have a perspective on this right now that I think the amount of the normalization of AI is coming, kind of to reference what you just said, which means I think of AI as the lever to get your car off the road to fix a flat tire so it can drive faster. Right now, that's how I'm thinking about it. AI is a tool that can power, grow, scale, make your business better, make it work better, make your solution solve a problem faster, more efficiently, more effectively, all the ways that you can power. I think that's how we're thinking about right now. That's how AI is kind of coming to fruition with companies that existed. With newer companies, I think the challenge is we don't know what we don't know around what AI can unlock. And so when you think of it as the whole car and AI is the thing, I talked to a company the other day and they said, well, our tool, you plug in anything and it teaches you anything. And I'm like, that's a really big ocean to boil with AI. Like, that is not solving a crisp problem that is easy to commercialize. So you're basically kind of dumbing down the thing that's really cool and complex because no one can wrap their head around what that means. So to me, there's kind of like steps in the process of getting to the point at which AI becomes its own car, right? Like right now, it's not. Right now, it's the gas in the tank, it's the tires on the car, it's the lever that gets it up so you can fix it and go faster, right? Like that is what AI is. And the way you deploy it there are many, many ways to deploy AI within a product or to accelerate your sales, accelerate your marketing, accelerate your internal communications, accelerate there's lots of ways you can use it as that tool to make you go faster. But ultimately, I think if AI is the thing you're using as the whole solution, it's just impossible right now. I've yet to see one where a .ai solution that says like, we are all the things AI, where anyone can even understand that enough to buy it. And so even if it's really interesting, even if it does solve a billion problems, it doesn't solve one problem really crisply. And that's an issue for a buyer, because a buyer doesn't buy to solve all their problems with one tool generally, right? We do, right? We do with our phones. So like when phones first came out, though, the problem they solved was you could get on these kind of digital phones was like you could make a phone call, right? You could get on the phone, make a phone call, and then you could use the web. You could get on the phone call, you could make a web, and you could text your friends. And the add-ons of the functionality that made the phone be like revolutionary was about steps towards the phone being like now everything to us. But we understand the features coming out with the phone as like solving unique problems. Now you can take all your pictures with it. You don't need a camera. You can calculate things. You don't need a calculator, right? But it was like distinct, separate problems we do want to solve made the thing the next big thing. And to me, that's almost like you have to suspend disbelief by solving one problem really well first and then other problems. So if you have a solution and you tack on AI, I do think you need it in every conversation, because if you're not using it for the basic stuff now, it's kind of a waste. The other day, I was talking to someone who told me she was writing all of her business development representatives' emails by hand. And I was like, can you just go to an AI like ChatGPT situation for that and then edit it? Like, you still might need to edit it, but why would you waste your time drafting from scratch like 10 emails or 20 emails? And that to me feels like a miss. If you're not doing the basics, housekeeping, if you're using a broom, not a vacuum, you're probably not in the right era. Same thing with AI. You have to really be sharp about when you use it, and it should be implemented in tools to accelerate the car. But I think ultimately that's my answer, is that I think like may not be the best, coolest thing forever to not have that be the car. But right now, I think people aren't ready for that.
Yeah. Oh, I love the explanation and the analogy. Um, so to have steady growth, you not only have to have a very crisp definition of a pain point and a solution, but you also have to, as you keep growing, have an amazing customer journey, right? How and you see that all the time, and with your focus on marketing, it's very clear to you. But how can startups? How can someone is a founder and is listening to this podcast, right? What will be your advice to improve the customer journey?
I mean, Matteo, you're so spot on. It's so true. I think a lot of startups think about the pain point and the solve, and then they're kind of like, okay, we're done. This is like, and then you're not done because the customer exists. If you do have them and you're kind of in that growth trajectory, you got to keep them. Not only do you have to keep them in the world we're in now, you have to make them an evangelist so they go out and sell it for you, right? Because part of that steady growth is having advocates and evangelists who are going to go out there and they net promote what you do. That's why we ask about net promoter, right? Is a big deal. Will you recommend it to a friend? And that's so important in these days with social media where everybody has a platform to talk about what they love. You want evangelism to be a key component of your product. So to me, whatever solution you're selling, whatever product you're selling, you have to think about the journey of a user holistically. And it doesn't mean you have to have a super high touch call center for employee, AI chatbots are getting cooler. They're cooler than ever. I work with a couple companies that have really cool AI chatbots. I think, and not like the chatbot where you type and it says like, we're sorry, we cannot help you. Like the actual AI driven chatbots. That's a place where AI comes into play. Having, and actually some of the airlines have really cool ones. Some of the banks have really cool ones. I mean, there's some really cool technology. It's not super expensive. I think having a really clear journey map of like what you want to do as problems arise and then evolving that as you go so that you can actually help support and have realistic responses to when people have requests for changes to things that you've created or they have an issue. It's interesting. I have a tech tool I'm using where they have a Slack group, and everybody who joins the software, they invite you to the Slack group so you can see product update feedback and give live iteration stuff. It's a really smart startup path to great product, great customer success because everybody's got a voice. It creates community. I don't know. It was kind of a silly side thing, but I thought it was really smart because now I'm part of this community and I can kind of like, hey guys, I'm having a challenge. And actually, by the way, creates evangelism because the community solves it for me sometimes. So I think those are really smart, like hacks to that. But I think you have to be thinking holistically about what's going to happen to your customer after they sign up in some way, whatever that form that takes.
And so my next question is, how do you find and nurture relationships with champions, evangelists, sponsors, etc., right? And you kind of hinted at something. You can create a community and some evangelists will thrive from there. What are some other thoughts you have on that, and how do I have a company, I sell software outsourcing, whatever. How can I get evangelists out there and champions, right?
I mean, so much of business, even today, especially in earlier days with startup, is relationship based. I think your earliest adopters, no matter for whatever reason they sign up, are going to be naturally or most likely evangelists. And as you put them out there in the universe, I think building smart feedback loops from those folks. So I've seen people set up advisory boards. I've seen people set up, kind of like just chat sessions where they do kind of like insight groups with those people. Why'd you sign up? What can I pull from this? Who would you recommend I speak to? Those kind of things are smart to do. I actually, in a prior company, in a startup that I worked with, we kind of like we found as we put out that there are people who liked our social media posts or would reshare our social media posts. We would direct message them and then actually reach out and say, hey, do you want to be an evangelist for our brand, a brand ambassador of sorts? And then we kind of just once a year would like get them all together on a call and chat about what we were doing. But by the way, they kept posting about us because we had engaged with them. I think, there's this very basic, very silly, but very true thing. You reached out to me. I love connecting with humans. Most humans like connecting with other humans. Some people don't, but most people do. And I think having points of connection is why we're all here in whatever form that takes for you. And so as a company, being human, having human points of contact, especially in the earlier stages, will build trust, build loyalty, build connection. And that's what we all want. And whether that's in the form of a bigger community or it's in the form of one-to-ones, even if you get an insight from a person on a one-to-one conversation, it's worth that investment to understand why or why not they will engage with you as an ambassador to your brand. And ultimately, I think the other thing that's really important is solving big problems. Like, think about the worst experience you had with a brand and they fixed the problem. I can think of a couple. I especially can think of one. I had a really bad experience with an airline who shall remain nameless. And, it was a really bad experience. I got to the airport, the ticket was canceled. I couldn't get a new flight. I was in the airport overnight. It was a disaster. I called and shared my experience, and they overboard went the other direction in making up for it. And I now have 2 credit cards from that airline, and I only travel on that airline. I think when someone fixes a pain problem, again, to the pain point and crisp solution, when you have a bad experience and someone comes at you hard with, I had a company I order from, and they messed up my order and they sent me flowers once. Like, I think the breakthrough things, you remember that. I remember it. You remember those things, and they make you a more loyal, more engaged advocate, So I think that you shouldn't underestimate the value of those connections, of those fixing problems, solving pain points moments.
Fixing problems, remembering that we're all humans, and investing in the relationships. I love it. And how much does it help in building trust when companies make themselves vulnerable and really open to feedback, right? Because I've seen companies that say they are open to feedback and they are not open to feedback, or say they will fix your problems and they don't fix their problems, or that will never acknowledge that they did something wrong. Do you feel that having that openness to acknowledge that you did something wrong and just mending it makes a huge difference in your case?
100%. I mean, I know it seems crazy because we're talking about tech, but I think vulnerability is the ultimate sign of trust building. I'd say the ultimate initiator in trust building, right? You think about any kind of human interaction you have where the person says something that makes you angry. The reaction A is, wow, I'm angry, and coming back at them. And the reaction that elicits back from the other person is never one of connection immediately. Think about that person making you angry and saying, wow, is everything okay? I feel like maybe something's going on. Can we figure this out? And making yourself vulnerable to get feedback that maybe it was you, or maybe it wasn't you, or maybe it's something else. That vulnerability immediately changes the tone in the room, the air in the room. And I think as companies, we have to think about that, because every kind of marketing, B2B, B2C, is B2H. I talk about this all the time. It's all business to human. At the end of the day, we all want to be heard. We all want to connect. We all want to have trust with the brands and people that we think are in our, who are allowing into our lives, because we're being vulnerable by allowing a company to come into our business or our life. Maybe the tech we buy is going to make us look bad because we bought the wrong tech. Maybe it's going to make our company fail. Maybe, the person's going to be rude to us, and the rest of their CEO is going to be like, wow, that company's awful. I think being as a company more vulnerable and building trust enables you to get more entry points into places and with people and with companies that are customers. So to me, it's all tied.
Do you think this is only going to get important in the future of work as technology evolves, and we keep trying to go back to valuable and meaningful human relationships?
100%. You cannot, especially with AI and tech proliferating. There's all these memes in the world now. I have teenagers, and there's these memes about, how kids are kind of like always on their phones and never having a one-to-one face-to-face. I think that is eventually, curving in the direction of how do we get more human connection? How do we have more trust? how do we come back to a world or move forward to a world where we can both have technology and trust and vulnerability? Like, I think that's coming full force in that direction, especially for younger folks who maybe feel that they have less of those touch points because everything feels like it's on a machine and it's technologically focused. So to me, that is the future. And I think like cultivating that in our own startup younger folks and creating that enables people to have connection where we've lost a lot of it, and enables people to be more successful as we move forward. Because I don't think it goes away. As humans, we still want those things. It's just that like the devices got in the way, you know, and I think the tech got in the way, and all of a sudden we thought you had to like bot email people on LinkedIn a million messages to, you know, AI is going to do that for you instead of like doing the human connection. I think there's both connection and scale have to play hand in hand, right? So like not to knock outreach on LinkedIn, but I think, you know, there's it has to play hand in hand, and finding that happy medium actually I think requires some AI, but I think it's we're now at the point where we can figure that out. We can navigate it.
Jessica, how important when you're looking at firms, companies, and decided which one to invest in or not, how important is the team, right? How important is that group of people that is leading the company?
I mean, very. You have to have, I think now, especially because we're a lot of us remote, right? Like, and you know, talk 10 years ago, 5 years ago, you and I would have been in the same room doing this. And now so much of this happens on screens. I think the right people are critical. And what that means is to me, is a good balance of personalities, styles, things that are collaboratively productive. Doesn't mean they're, it's so funny. Someone said to me once, like, if you have a really strong personality CEO, you got to have people who are not yes people with that person. And I was like, you know what? If the organization moves forward, folks are retained and doing well, and everybody's thriving, really doesn't matter what the dynamics are. It matters that the organization can thrive with that combination, because different companies, like different people, thrive in different combinations. And so my feeling is if you can find the right dynamics of open communication, that is enough open communication that everyone can function together, good ideas and alignment, and really high EQ functional behavior, right? Like no one's doing things that are aggressive or like, you know, not okay or against the law. Like I think all those things have to come together on a leadership team, but it's not because you have to be a visionary CEO. Maybe you have a visionary COO. Maybe you have a visionary CPO or CFO, right? Like what comes from who is not a formula, but I definitely think the right combination matters. And sometimes it takes a little bit of bumpiness to figure out the right combination of leaders. And I think that's one thing where private equity and VC can sometimes struggle, because the math around what you need to succeed is not an exact math. It's not an exact science. Like there's no formula for the perfect team. Finding out how people gel to move an organization forward is important. I actually think it's great to have someone in your team, if you're PE or VC, not to like be biased in what I'm doing, but I think having people who have actually operated in really highly successful and not successful operating teams themselves is great for investors who are trying to figure out how to put the right people in the right seats, because we've done it. We've seen when there's high performing and not high performing. And if that person is aware enough and has enough experience, hopefully they can help identify, hey, you've got a visionary CFO. Maybe you don't need a visionary CEO. Maybe you need an executing CEO who can go out and like sell and grow and fundraise and structure deals, you know. I think that is like a level of organizational EQ you need in an investment team to help structure that in organizations, because it is important.
So if a founder is listening and they're having trouble, forming the right team, right? Maybe they identify that they need something different, but they just don't know how to go about it. What would be your advice, or what's your advice to companies that you're working with on how to build that leadership team?
I think, you know, there's not like one way, but I definitely love the concept of working with another, either a coach, an expert, someone who's been in your role before, to build the profiles of the team. Like, don't build the profile of the role you're looking for, build the profile of your team. Look at strengths and weaknesses, like do a SWOT for everybody on your team around the things your business needs to achieve. Who plays visionary? Who's the best communicator? Who's great at leading excellent meetings and driving things forward? Who's your get shit done people? Who are your, strategery people who can kind of like get all the strategy organized? Who's going to corral the team and rally you like from an emotional standpoint so everybody's psyched and moving forward. And if that all falls on one person, that's probably not ideal, because a leadership team is supposed to be a team and everybody's got to have roles. But I think if you can figure out the SWOT of the different people of your team, you'll see, just like running a business, where the gaps and holes are, and you can go out and deliberately look to fill that with a profile of someone who has those skills. And what I mean is, literally, when you're hiring an executive, like, you want them to come in and demonstrate. You have to ask questions against the gaps in your SWOT to that person to find out who checks those fields. And the reference cycle of finding out about them, you should be asking people, yes, but challenging, is that really the strength of this person? And I think part of that is also like talking to other executives about their own experiences, because inevitably your community of fellow executives will know people who fill the gaps you need to fill. And you may not fill all of them, but at least you could fill some and then cultivate the skills on the other areas. But I think it is like a business problem. There's not exact math, but I think that's the advice I would give, is be methodical the way you would about growing a business, about growing your team.
I love it. I love it. You got me thinking. Um, as a marketing leader, do you see huge differences between strategies, for services companies versus product companies, or are there more similar that we like to think, or should we think about them being more similar? What are your thoughts there?
I think there are differences. I haven't found like serious trends, right? Like, I think people right now, there's a lot, as we spoke about earlier, right? There are a lot of companies entering spaces. People are trying to be innovative and try new things. I think service, I don't know that there's like a distinct two lanes, but I would say that a lot of services companies are trying to be more formulaic about feeling like a value added product than they ever were before. Because in an environment where cash is tight, services feel sometimes like undefined, unmeasurable, hard to quantify in terms of the value add. And so services companies, in order to keep their services as, like a required piece of the balance sheet, as opposed to an operating cost that needs to be shed in a tough market, have to have the burden now of proving the value, the ROI on what they deliver in a different way than they used to. And products companies have to justify, I think, if they're not really sticky in an ecosystem, they have to justify why, again, not just ROI, but they've always had to do that. They have to justify why they're going to really engage the team, to be a utility tool. Like, they have to compete against other products and show why they're like table stakes. And I think that's both about what is the value you bring now more than ever. I think it's just the pressure is now on services companies a little heavier, because unless you really have like ton of cash to burn, services a lot of times like, well, we can't really afford, this agency, this whatever it is, the same way we used to be able to, this consulting partner or whatever it is, the way we used to. So I hope that answers a little bit my
It
thought on it.
does.
I don't know if
It
that's the
does.
exact answer.
No, no, no. It does. It does. It's very good. I took notes. I'm taking notes on all the answers, really, because as you keep speaking, and I'm a CEO and partner and owner in a company, I'm not only really glad that the audience is learning, I'm learning as we go, right? So I love the answer. Thank you very much. Let's go back a little bit in memory lane, and tell me more about how you got started in technology. Did you want to be in technology? Was that an accident? How did that happen?
I'm probably the most random career story you'll ever meet. I mean, I think I kind of fell accidentally into everything I've done, partially because I had parents who were not anywhere near this industry that I'm in or function, frankly. And there wasn't, I mean, I'm old, so there wasn't internet when I was younger and trying to figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I only knew the things immediately around me. When I was a little girl, my grandmother gave me a book of pictures of castles because she thought I was really into princesses as like, classic. Actually was a tomboy, but I was very into princesses and sports. And my grandmother gave me this book about castles from, I think they got it in Scotland. And I fell in love and wanted to be an architect. And like, that was it. I want to be an architect. I was going to develop castles and like stuck with me. Went to college for that.
A nice dream. Yeah, it will be. I mean,
Beautiful
just
dream.
building castles everywhere, right? I don't know if you're going to find
I was
castles,
like, just going to
but
build castles. I
beautiful.
mean, and like didn't know any different. And I didn't even really understand what that meant. Got to college, majored in landscape architecture, urban studies, like that kind of, genre of city planning, and realized when I
My
graduated and
father,
had,
my
go
father is
ahead.
an architect and works in city planning.
No
By
way.
the way, yeah.
My sister-in-law is a very, very accomplished city planner in the city of New York. She basically runs a ton of, she's the chief strategy officer of the city of New York. I mean, that's a huge, she's
Wow.
brilliant. Yeah, this was not me,
She
but
builds
she's brilliant.
castles.
She
Yeah.
builds castles, exactly. I'm like, how is it that you're living my dream? Um, and your father too. But interestingly, when I, graduated from college, I had a lot of loans, like not in a great position to take a apprenticeship in city planning, which pays approximately $1, in US dollars. So it's like not gonna be able to support my financial needs. And had this awakening where I was, oh my God, I'm like, I have nothing. I'm not from anything that's gonna help me launch my life. I better figure this out. And like took the first job I got, which actually was in finance, had nothing to do with tech. I was in finance as an analyst at JP Morgan for 3 years. And then I was 3 years an analyst at the National Football League. I was in like ops and financy and HRE stuff. And I kind of like did all the things that I don't know, I was trying to figure it out. Went back
Was
to
that
business
like a
school.
was that like a old boys club or not so much? Was it changing at that
No, I
time?
actually was hired by an amazing woman
Okay.
who is incredible, who I followed from JP Morgan. She brought me over from JP Morgan to the NFL, and she's still a mentor. My boss at JP Morgan is still a mentor and advocate, and my boss at the NFL is still a mentor and advocate because those people changed my life. And interestingly, the woman that I worked for at JP Morgan, who was the COO of like investment management private bank, ginormous, incredible role, incredible woman, who I adore to this day, said to me, have you ever thought about brand management, marketing? When I was like a year into my analyst role with her. And I was like, why would you say that? She's like, you're articulate, you love math, you love creative, you love all these things. And that's kind of marketing. And I didn't even know what marketing really was. Like I had been trained out of college to learn that equity and stock were different things. Like I knew nothing about nothing. I was one of those people who's just kind of like a blank slate. And she told me that, and I didn't know it at the time when I was 23, right? But that became my home. It was the thing that I found, and I found it kind of because of her. When I got to the NFL a couple years later, I saw people doing marketing live in the NFL. And it was the cool. And by the way, a lot of them were women, people of color, like a really diverse place, super awesome place. And I learned about marketing and I fell in love. And I was like, how do I get into this? And I didn't think I could do it from an analyst role, which was correct. So I went back to business school to go into marketing because I knew coming out of that, she had tipped my hat to look at it. It didn't even open my eyes to it until someone told me. And that just shows you how much influence you can have. You, the greater you in the world, can have on other individuals. Like, really, she
Yeah.
changed my life. And the woman at the NFL changed my life because she encouraged me to go back to school. She was like, you don't have to do this just because it's what you're doing. Like, go back to school. Don't be afraid of it.
Did
And
you had loans? I mean, you said you came out of school and you had a lot of loans, and that's why you got the analyst job.
yeah,
When you went back to business school, had you already cleared that, or you were just
yeah,
taking on
yeah.
more?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. Like I think it's really one of those things where Like I had made a huge dent because I was on Wall Street and that helped at the time.
Right.
But like, you take on new things, right? So I got married, and when I went back to business school, I got married, and my husband's amazing, and he had his stuff, and I had my stuff, and we're trying to figure it out. And it's really hard to think about going back full time. But my mother actually really encouraged me and said, and also my husband now, who at the time was my fiance, but they just said, you can do, like, we believe in you. You'll figure it out. You can navigate this. Like, don't be afraid. I was very lucky that I had amazing cheerleaders in my family and, with my now spouse. And I think, I was afraid to take the risk to go back and pay for the full time, but everybody encouraged and was amazing and said, don't not do something that you want to do out of fear of what it will mean for you. I think that means different things now, in fairness, because it's even way more expensive than it was when I went back. But I think, having people push me to take the risk is like something that's been meaningful to me throughout my whole career. And that was a
Yeah.
big moment for that.
And you were also very brave, right? Because I mean, you had the right mentor, you had the right environment, people around you were very good about it, but you were super brave. I mean, it's not everyone takes that, makes that choice, or just many people just go with whatever because they can, they keep going, and then making a switch in your career. That's amazing. And so, how did things progress after that?
I was super scared, frankly, to make the switch, but I didn't know how I could not, because I knew that I wanted to be happy. And I had to take a huge pay cut coming out of business school from what I had made going in order to get into marketing. And I was so ready, so happy to try it and just see. And I felt coming out of business school that even though it was financially going to be really hard, and we were in New York at the time, it was a very expensive place. We're just married. We just had a wedding. It was very expensive. Like we were kind of in a bad, like moment that way. But I was like, I got to try this. I got to try and see if I can do it, because I just know that I love it. And if I can't make it work, I'll figure something out. I'll go back to finance. I'll figure something out, was kind of my thought. And I was young, so I was kind of stupid also in that, which was probably helpful. Gift. It was a gift. And I went to my first job out of college at Avon, and I was lucky because a woman there saw my resume, thought it was kind of interesting, and like out of interest, I think, to figure out who I was and what I was applying for this job, like this junior job as a brand manager, associate brand manager. She like gave me a shot. She just happened to think my resume was like worth a shot, and she brought me in, and she was like, okay, but we're gonna like put you in a supply. We don't have a desk. Like, you got to sit in a supply closet, and we're gonna pay you like no money, and you're just gonna be like doing whatever we say and just learning. And I was like, okay, I can do that. And they literally took the doors off a supply closet, and I sat like in the shelves with like stacks of pens above me and like one shelf that I put my computer on.
It's like a movie.
It is, but it was the best opportunity. Like, I think just being hungry and getting a chance was important to me. And having kind of interesting resume let me do that. Even though it was weird, it was interesting. And I think, this is my whole thing, is I love to pay it forward, because I think people giving you a shot is the only, like, human connection. Again, the only way you get a shot is when a human gives you a shot. And I was like, please give me a shot. I've got this. I'll do anything. And if you love something, I find you rise at it. And I think that's true universally. If you get stuck in a lane and you feel you can't change, it's really hard to rise, because you're not passionate. You're not gonna kill yourself and do all the things you got to do to like just get it done and prove you can do it. And that hunger, that fire is important, and it does change your career. I think after that, I lost my fear. My inhibition went away, and I changed career. I changed, not careers. I stayed in the same career. I stayed in marketing, but I changed fields frequently, partly because we moved and I had babies and whatever. But I think also because I wasn't afraid, because I knew that I had gone from something I knew nothing about in college to something I knew nothing about out of college to something I knew nothing about in business school. I felt like such an imposter there. And then but I
Right.
did it, and then to something I knew nothing about in marketing, and I was always okay. And that, like, those 3 or 4 experiences change your risk tolerance, because you're like, I'm okay. And also I can explain the narrative because it was authentic. I
Yeah.
really wanted those things. And I think that was what made me fearless about like having a nonlinear trajectory after that. I had a lot of roles after graduate school, and it just was nonlinear. And I just told people like I embraced the nonlinear because I realized the things in my role at Avon, the things I had done as an analyst made me kind of be able to kill it in my role there because I was like deep in budgeting and math. I understood analytics and growth and scale. I understood ops. Like when we got to the manufacturing part of brand management at Avon, which is I was running like a part of the fragrance portfolio. I understood the ops. Like I understood how it all worked. Like, it was like I was like, oh, I actually don't not know. I don't know nothing. Like I actually know
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
And that was really confidence building. And I hope for people listening that if they do have a moment of self-doubt, that they can say to themselves, I'm capable of learning, I'm capable of storytelling. And those two things combined will open the door for me because you, again, human connection, when you walk in a room and tell someone your story and you can clearly articulate it with passion and why you believe you should go where you're going next,
Yeah.
it's moving to the person on the other side.
Yeah. No, it's really amazing, and I love the growth mindset and the ability to just learn, adapt, and take whatever you had in your background and use whatever works from that experience to the new experience, right? And I think that that's probably your superpower.
I think
Um,
it's probably everyone's superpower. We just don't know it.
some people use it, some people don't use it, right? Um, so do you did a little bit of operations and now you're an operating partner. Do you like marketing more than operations, or operations more? Did a little bit of everything, right? But are you in that? Let's go back to the team that you were describing, right? And you have the strategic one, the visionary, the get shit done. That what would Jessica be in that team?
I'm probably the get shit done person mostly. And so I think, just to kind of bring that together, I think the thing I learned in switching roles was that my superpowers were I'm really good at learning things fast and then applying the things I've learned fast. And I love to get shit done. Like, love it. Like, I love, and you can tell this about yourself if you're the kind of person who makes lists and checks them off. Like, in your phone, you go to the grocery store, I keep a list in my phone when I go to the grocery store. My husband's like, don't you know what you're going to buy you buy the same thing every week? And I'm like, yes, but I love the like checking something off the list, deleting it from the list makes me feel good. Like that's a high for me. That's my personality. So like I don't even care. I'm almost agnostic about what I'm learning, what I'm doing, if the stuff that I'm doing accomplishes something. Like that's how I feel fulfilled at the end of the day. And I feel like I'm like, I did it. I got stuff done. I think that is an important self-awareness thing to have. And for me, that means that in my roles in marketing, so as an operating partner, I actually still get to do marketing things. And I can tell you about that role in a minute. But I think the biggest thing is I love to learn and do, and scale companies is how I learn and do. Like come in, learn the company, figure it out. The playbooks of how you scale, I know because they're the same. The formula to doing the things in marketing you do over 20 plus years, you know how to do those things. The application is where it gets interesting. How does that apply? How does a trade show strategy apply to this company versus that company? How does a social media and executive posting strategy apply to this company versus that company, right? Like that is where it gets really juicy and interesting. And that learning curve for me is fun, and the checking things off is fun. And so all that's true about all my roles, especially now more than ever, because I have a portfolio of things, keeps it like really interesting for me. And I can get a lot done in a week, like a lot. That's what I was saying to you earlier. Like this week I got so much done, but I also, spent time with my family. I got like all the things done. It was one of those sweet spot weeks where the balance works. And I think the operating partner role really now that I work in is I'm very fortunate that the PE firm took a chance on me and lets me be a part of their organization to do a couple things. One is I actually get to operate as a supporter, as a guide, and as a partner to all the marketing leaders across their portfolio companies. And the other part is sometimes I get helicoptered in if there's like I have a project now with one company where the CMO just doesn't have the bandwidth to do something. And so I'm helicoptering in to help her with that particular project. or I can help advise if they need any support evaluating due diligence on a company that they're acquiring, or partnering as an M&A part of the M&A portfolio. And those are kind of the things I do. And then I just collaborate to get all the portfolio company leaders collaborating together so that I can learn from their playbooks and they can learn from each other. Because there's never a point at which you stop learning. Like, I don't know everything. I will never know everything. And so people will bring stuff up and I'm like, ooh, genius. Can I take that and rinse it over here and repeat it in this other place? So that's my learn and do, like life in full color now.
3 follow-up questions to you.
Yes.
First one, do you ever get too many emails unread in your inbox, or do you always keep it at 0?
I always keep it at 0. And actually, I married someone who was the exact opposite of me. And I joke, my daughter, my oldest daughter, who's a teenager, and I joke when I put her phone into the car and it goes on CarPlay. And I'm like, it's unhygienic. I can't look at it because she's got like 65 unread text messages. And I'm like, you're your father. How did this happen? But I
No.
always have 0 on everything, because, or if I keep like 2 voicemails, it's because I know what they are and I haven't returned them yet. But everything's always at 0. I love that. Makes me happy. Cleanliness is happiness for me.
Second question, when your family goes on vacation, how much in advance do you plan for it? And are you like, you go to Europe, whatever, are you like looking at all the stages and going like, okay, this is the Airbnb, this is the hotel, we're going to this city next? How are you on family vacations?
I'm actually leaving for a family vacation tomorrow, so this is highly apropos. So I have packed already, as of 3 days ago, almost 99% of it. There's like 1% that goes in the bag the last day. The plans, I like to build a skeletal plan, but that I'm very OCD about. Like, I know where we're staying, I know where we're going, I know how we're getting to all the things that I have planned, but I love scheduled, unscheduled time. So I have a lot of time where we're going to wander, because I think part of me would overschedule us to the point where we don't just discover. And I know and like love and adore my family and husband, and they love to explore also. And the discovery is a gift. And so I think we're going to actually a European city. And when we get there, we will spend time just observing, discovering, hopefully trying to disappear into the environment so we can just be observers without being disruptive, right? And disruptive Americans. And also just absorbing a different view of the world. And like, that's why I'm bringing my children there, is because this will be their first time going, because I want them to have empathy for and experience and appreciate other cultures. Like, I think it's so critical to the diversity of their thinking, and for them to be whole humans, to understand and empathize. And
Yeah.
I don't mean empathy like, for sadness, but empathy for like the experiences of other people is critical to who they are as humans.
And the third one, I was thinking as you were speaking that you are building castles. You are maybe not from scratch, or maybe your marketing company from scratch, right? But you're looking at houses, you are looking at how they are built, you're learning how they function, and then you turn them into castles.
I mean, I think that's highly insightful. And by the way, that warms my heart to think I may not have wasted my 4 years of undergraduate degree. Not completely. Not completely.
You are looking at the lay of the land, understanding how things work, right? And then building those castles. I love it.
I think that's right.
Jessica, one last question to you. When you are not working, right? What do you do when you are not working?
Well, I know this is not like the coolest answer. I love books. I have a bunch behind me. I love the public library. Near me, there's a public library, and the books are free, which is a thing that people forgot when Amazon came
Yeah.
out, that you could just go get a book. And I love people that know me. I go in, I love having a library book in my hands. I love that when I'm out in public, people ask me about that. Is that a public library book? It's a conversation starter, and it's a great thing. I run, I exercise, I love being active, but when I'm not being active, or with my family, who are amazing, I'm not going to lie, people talk about how horrible teenagers are, and my children are adorable and lovely and sweet. But when I'm not with them or when I am with them, they see me reading a lot. And I read fun things as much as I read serious things because I think letting your mind wander is a gift as much as letting your mind grow.
What are you reading right now?
I'm reading a very, very, very serious book called, I think it's called The Catch. It's like a romance novel, kind of some kind of silly romance. It's amazing. I love it. It's very light. It's about a fisherman. It's really like one of those fun things. And I think, sometimes I read really like tough books to read. I was reading
Right.
one the other day that was interesting, but it was very serious. It was called Being Mortal. And I think there's like it's good to have all the things going on with your brain. So right now I'm reading The Catch, which is just a silly, fun, amazing. It's really great. It's quick read, quick read. I should be done with it today, actually.
Do you do you ever I'm going to tell you how I read, and that might drive you crazy. I typically read like maybe 4 to 5 books at the same time, slowly.
Oh,
And I change and just change, right? So right now I'm reading the Goldfinch. Uh
nice.
yeah, very very nice. And I love New York. New York is one of my favorite cities in the world, and it starts
Me
in New
too.
York. Then they move to Vegas, and I don't know what will happen afterwards. But it's just I like books that have me travel to different places, right? Then I'm
Nice.
reading a more of a nerdy book, which is the third book on the Dune books, right? There are 6 of them, so it's like crazy. I'm reading. I don't know if you saw the Three Body Problem, but I'm reading the books, and I'm reading the third one on that series.
Yes.
And so it's like between Kindle and paperback. I'm always. How do you read? Do you like no, just one book, go finish it
I
very
do
quickly,
one
and
at
move
a
to the next?
time, but partially because my job is all over the place and I have 3 children and a crazy life. And so I like to have the linearity of following one story to finish. Also, I get immersed in the story and I
Right.
reread books. I reread books. So like I just reread The First 90 Days, which is this book about kind of like the first 90 days of your job because I have a friend who's starting and she was like, "Do you remember any learnings from that book?" And I was like, "I actually don't. I should reread it." I love that, but I think that's because it's kind of like the calm in my crazy storm. But for you, I think that's like very revealing about how facile and smooth your brain flows between topics. It's like that's an amazing thing. So kudos on that because I would love to get to that stage in my reading too. I
Thank you.
aspire
But
to be you as a reader.
the weird thing that happens with me is that I don't track the story as good as you're probably tracking it. To me, it's more about the feeling I get when I'm reading, and it depends, right? Some days I just want to go to New York. Some days I want to go to some other planet in the universe. Some days it's like it's more about feeling and how I feel, and I read always before sleep. I'm not watching any series, no Netflix, not whatsoever. I grab a book or the Kindle or whatever, and I read until it drops, and then I put it
But
away and
Mateo, I
sleep.
love that because you're like an adventurous reader. You can take the adventure flows with your life, and reading is like almost a scaffold to your life, which is a beautiful thing. So that's gorgeous. Like I love that. I think for me, it's more an escape from my life, but for you, it's more of a scaffold to yours. So maybe we both win. Maybe we both win.
Definitely we both. Jessica, this was an amazing conversation. There's so much to continue talking. I'm sure we will continue and talk about books and life and everything and technology.
I hope so. And
Um,
all your beautiful instruments, which I would love to play.
yes, you're invited to. If you ever come to South America, I have a
You're my
barbecue
first stop.
right next here. There's a barbecue, right? So I will,
Amazing. Food and music, my two favorite
put a
vices.
put a
So we're there.
music and good conversations between humans.
Exactly. Exactly.
Nothing better than that. Thank you so much. I hope we can do this sometime again in the future.
Thank you so much, Mateo.